Thank you, Amy, for that warm introduction. And I want to take a moment to also extend our gratitude to Sonam and Chime for traveling all this way. And what I only really just learned when they arrived a couple days ago is that they left their own very similar forum in Bhutan a day early to be here with us. So we're going to hear some of the insights from the forum that they were just hosting on operationalizing gross national happiness. And so I think that's going to be quite relevant to some of the things we've been discussing here as well. I also want to point out that this is the first of two sessions looking at or thinking about gross national happiness in Bhutan. So tomorrow, one of our other colleagues, Tsering Youngsum with the Gelufu Mindfulness City Foundation will also be talking about gross national happiness and Bhutan's current king's vision for a city that embodies the principles of gross national happiness on the southern border in Bhutan. So please make sure to come back for that session as well. So before we get into some conversation, it's been such a delight to hear from many of you about your experiences in Bhutan in the past, but I also imagine that many of you have not had the opportunity to travel to Bhutan or think about it all that much. And so I want to just give you a very, very, very brief primer on where Bhutan is. Yes? Okay, so we're talking about a small kingdom country in the eastern Himalaya, about twice the size of New Jersey. So about 15,000 square miles with an estimated population of about 780,000 people, give or take. The southern border sits at 100 meters above sea level, and so basically the Gangetic Plain, subtropical, and rises up to about 7,500 meters, so the high Himalaya, in a very, very short distance. So diverse ecosystems and vast forests. Diverse forests, which makes Bhutan a very unique place because these forests have been constitutionally protected. So Bhutan's constitution mandates that there be 60% forest cover in the country in perpetuity. Right now, that forest cover is estimated to be about 72%, give or take, and depending on how you're counting forests. But that means that Bhutan is a carbon sink. And as a result, Bhutan is the world's first carbon negative country. And indeed, as a result of that, Bhutan has committed to remain carbon neutral in perpetuity as well. That was a commitment that was made in 2009 and then reaffirmed in 2015 as part of the nationally determined contributions at the in the Paris Agreement. But at the core of these very, very important contributions to global health is the philosophy of gross national happiness. And that's where I want to start our conversation, and then ultimately we'll lead into a conversation about Tarayana Foundation's work in Bhutan, as well as our shared work in Bhutan. So, Chime, will you please start us off by talking about what is gross national happiness?
That's sort of a loaded question. There's happiness, as you know, means different things to different people. But when you take happiness as a national goal, as the young teenager king pronounced in the early 70s, it was definitely coming from a right place, with economic progress alone and by itself is not significant or not sufficient to measure human flourishing or human progress. So at a very early age, His Majesty, the fourth king of Bhutan, Jigme Singye Wangchuck, acknowledged the fact that our bottom line should not just be about economic progress. Economic progress is necessary, but it's one of the four pillars that upholds the actual development of the nation, its people. We couldn't just move ahead making money if we didn't protect our environment. That was a very important component of his philosophy, His Majesty's philosophy. So we were blessed with a pristine ecosystem, and His Majesty felt that it was important to maintain it that way. Of course, there were advisors to the young king who said you should cut down your forests, pay for your development work, sell your forest products. But that was an advice he wisely did not take, and we are so blessed that as a teenager king, he had the withalls to decide what was good for a very tiny mountainous kingdom, if we destroyed our forests and our ecosystem, then everything else was going to be downhill from there. That was something that, this was before the times when conservation became popular. So definitely we have a lot to thank our king for giving us this precious gift of gross national happiness being more important than the economic development alone. So that's sort of a more holistic measure of human development. It's more leaning towards well-being, I guess, overall well-being of both ecosystem as well as people, so that people living in harmony with nature is the path forward for Bhutan. That was decided when he came to the throne. So, yeah.
And my understanding of gross national happiness is that it moves beyond a philosophy and has actually been put into practice in many ways, from the policy level to the grassroots level, which we'll talk about in a moment. But at the policy level, how does gross national happiness shape new laws and regulations and government approaches in Bhutan?
Yeah, you mentioned in your introductory thing also that we have. People keep asking us, how do you measure happiness? It's such an abstract subject to measure. So how do you measure it? And so. The Center for Bhutan Studies and the GNH Studies, they've come up with the parameters, 4 pillars. You looked at your own sustainable development aspects, you looked at good governance, you looked at the economic development, conservation of environment. And so these became the 4 large pillars. These were further broken down into 9 domains. That's of well-being, measure of people's progress, included time use and all of those things that are important to measure. I think we've sort of fallen into a fallacy of, there's a measuring mistake, I guess, when you're measuring only economic progress. That does not capture the important essence of what makes life worth living. What does human flourishing consist of? So when you measure the wrong things, then you end up with the wrong development. I guess what I'm trying to say is, okay, economic development, you can't compare the US economic development or top of the pile, but when you look at the happiness index of it, it doesn't guarantee you happiness just because your per capita income is at the top of the world. So just saying that you need all of the other things. Your community has to come along with you. Your culture is something that grounds you and embeds you into being who you are as a good human being. So all of those factors are equally important. And so, yeah, they worked very hard in making sure we had all the right matrices to measure our progress. Of course, a little complicated, studying all the time use and all of that. And they've been doing these extensive surveys around the country every 5 years just to see how we compare in the past 5 years to the current. And happily, we're making slight progress towards increased happiness in spite of all the difficulties and challenges that we've been facing economically. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so Sonam, if I may, one of the things that has always struck me is that nearly all countries on Earth have fueled their development, at least in part, through the extraction and exploitation of natural resources. And as Chime described, Bhutan's 4th king wisely chose a different path. But that path has come at a cost and at sacrifice, right? And so I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about some of the challenges that Bhutan faces today as a result of those sacrifices. And what I want to point out and what I think is so interesting and important to understand is that Bhutan truly punches above its weight in terms of in terms of the size of the carbon sinks, in terms of being carbon negative, meaning that they are taking in the extra carbon that the rest of the world is putting out, and doing so at the sacrifice of economic development in many ways. And so that has a lot of consequences in rural areas especially. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about that, and we can start talking a bit about how Tarayana addresses that.
So in terms of challenges, because we're a small, we're a mountainous country, so even to reach from one community to another takes in a lot of time and resources. So the cost of service delivery is quite high. So there are a lot of challenges, and as the country develops, the inequality is rising. There's unemployment issues, there's access to market issues, there are a lot of issues. And for Tarayana, we're actually operationalizing this philosophy, the concept of change at the grassroots level, by ensuring that whatever Chime just said is all intact and balancing the Development Act. So let me just introduce the foundation. So you just heard about the Queen Mother who established our foundation. And the Queen Mother, Dorji Wangchuck, when she was the queen, she used to be the patron for environment and agriculture. And in that capacity, she traveled throughout the country. So that was 30 years ago, when most of our rural communities did not have access to road, electricity, and the modern amenities. So the queen literally trekked to all these all the places she trekked and spent time. As a queen, she had the option of riding ponies, riding yaks up in the mountain, but she chose to walk to really feel the challenges people living in these communities feel on a daily basis. And Tarayana, the organization, was founded as an outcome of all the travels Her Majesty made 25-30 years ago. And again, just to clarify, foundation, there are many foundations here, but we are not the foundation that makes grants and make it available. We look for grants to make things happen on the ground. So that's the difference. So this is the Queen traveling and literally encountering communities living in poverty, in isolated conditions. And most of the communities Her Majesty visited were living in poverty. So that's how the foundation was founded. We just celebrated our 22nd anniversary. And we have developed this holistic development model. And today we still continue to scale this up. And through this model, what we do is we don't, plan what we want to do in a community and go and implement, but rather we spend a lot of time with these small communities to really understand the issues and challenges they face and co-create the solutions, make the plans, based on their availability. So it's really a community-led approach that we undertake at Tarayana, and we have our own field officers who live and work in these communities so that they understand the communities better. All the communities have different social dynamics, so it really enables us to make effective planning, effective programs when we understand the issues better. So if I may continue talking about some of the programs we have. So Tarayana in Bhutan, today we are also known for doing housing in rural areas. So in this holistic approach that we undertake, we start from basic needs like housing improvement. As you've seen in the previous slide, most of the communities, the families do not own a proper house to begin with. So when they live in such conditions, every day is a struggle. There's a lot of insecurity. They cannot think of their future. They have to worry about their roof falling apart. So we mobilize them into groups, and then they help each other build the houses within the community. And as you can see, most of the, in fact, all the houses we build are with locally available resources, materials. And it's not just building houses, but it's literally building community, working together, strengthening the community vitality, the cohesiveness. And it's very low carbon footprint housing improvement program that we undertake. Sorry. So along with housing, we've also, because these communities did not have electricity, we introduced solar home lighting, and then we created economic opportunities with the natural resources they have around in their communities. Then we helped market these products so that they have economic returns. And these are traditional skills which would almost go into extinction. But now that we have found market for them, they are keen on reviving, motivated to keep it alive. Then we also make sure that all the children from these communities attend school, and we make sure that they have water and sanitation and food and nutrition security. This community, they were growing different varieties of vegetables for the first time. They had a lot of water issues, and this is a smoked fish. So in this community, it's a tradition to smoke fish, and we have revived, created market linkage. So now they still continue to promote this tradition and food security. So they had these communities have a lot of fallow lands, so water was an issue. So we introduced better water schemes, and then they could cultivate all the fallow land. Yeah, so basically operationalizing this philosophy of GNH at the grassroots level is all about everything that we do. We've packaged it in this holistic approach, whereby it's a community-led development. We are there just as a facilitator. We don't go and do the work. So we make sure that after we phase out, they're good to be on their own. They don't become dependent on us. So right from day one, we make them take the lead in taking the community development forward. And we've always emphasized on skills and empowerment of the community, so that they are empowered. Yeah, and when you work with, when you want to make sure that this works, you need a lot of patience because all the communities have different social dynamics, and you really need to invest a lot of time listening to them, understanding their issues, and based on that, do planning so that it's the plan that they need, not something that we imposed. So there's a greater buy-in from the communities. So yeah, I think we've missed some of the slides, but basically this is how we operationalize GNH in the grassroots communities, and there's a lot of demand for our services in Bhutan, and yeah, we're working in over 1,000 villages. Yeah, I'll stop pause here.
So thank you. So Sonam, it was really interesting. The first time that we sat down to chat was in Dubai at COP28, and there was a mention yesterday of taking advantage of those opportunities that you have when you sit down with somebody and say, oh, we should work together on something. And that is what happened with us in Dubai at COP28. We sat down and we said, oh, Karuna Foundation and Tarayana Foundation, we have overlapping goals, and we should figure out a way to work together. And we did, and we'll get to that in just one moment. But one of the things that Sonam said to me in that meeting was, housing is at the core of what we do, and yet it's extremely difficult to raise funds to support housing. Now, earlier today, during the workshop sessions at our table, we were discussing how the ways in which housing in Cancer Alley, housing is a pathway into community discussions. And I thought, that's so interesting because we're hearing something similar in Bhutan, and this is how Tarayana Foundation works as well. And I'm wondering, maybe Omchimi, could you say a few words about why housing might be the best way to start these kinds of conversations about resilience and grassroots community-led efforts?
Sure. Basically, we did all the general. I come from government. I had worked for 16 years in government before coming to the foundation. So, as is the issue with all governments, I think, very siloed approach to whatever work is assigned as your responsibility in that space. But working with local communities, you can't approach it that way. You have to look at them and really listen to their needs, and sort of, they tell you exactly why things are not working, because everyone's coming to them from different angles. So the more you sit and listen and engage with the local communities, you realize they know a lot. And we just have to pay attention to what their needs are and not superimpose what we think they need. And so that was the first learning, that you had to unlearn quite quickly and then sort of relearn their needs and aspirations. So housing became central. We tried many other things that failed, and so when we came to this housing component, it became very clear that this was centrally important. If their own family was secure, they were living comfortably, they could then pause and look at other opportunities to take them on to development. It's the same thing for us with the globe. I think the planet, we just have this one big planet that we call home, and if we don't take care of it, we're also not listening. I just feel that this is sort of very interrelated, one at a very personal and local level, and the other at a global level. If we don't take care of the only home we have and fix it, and look after it properly and make it strong, we are sort of shooting ourselves in the foot by doing all of the other development actions. Don't mean anything down the line. If you're trying to think that we can survive independent of the planet, I don't think we can. So that's something very philosophical at one level and very practical on the other level. And so this is something that the local communities taught us. And we have to have that humility to really learn from both nature as well as the communities we serve. There's a lot of knowledge, indigenous as well as the practical local systems and knowledge systems that have been distilled over the ages. And I think we can't just kind of sweep it under the carpet and say, okay, these are people who need help and we know how to help them. I think that's the wrong approach. The approach should be to really listen to them, deep listening, and then pay attention to what they're asking and sort of then help them along that line. I don't know whether I answered your question, but this is...
Yes, that answered my question. Yes, thank you. So, and it set up our next topic really nicely. We are very excited to announce that just last week, 2 weeks ago, just last week, Her Majesty celebrated, Her Majesty the Queen Mother celebrated her 70th birth anniversary. And in recognition of that, Karuna Foundation made our largest grant in history, $1 million to Tarayana Foundation. To seed our joint effort at scaling up and taking the housing program that Tarayana has already developed to the next level to create climate resilient homes in Bhutan. So many of the rural communities in Bhutan are already facing the consequences of climate change, despite the country's efforts at remaining carbon negative and really contributing to global efforts to fight climate change. They are sadly already experiencing the effects that are destroying homes already and making places, especially in southern Bhutan, very, very uncomfortable to live. And so we are nearing completion on 2 prototype homes. And Sonam, Pam, would you like to share? We can go back. We actually skipped over the photos of them because they accidentally ended up in the middle.
Yeah, so with Karuna Foundation, we started doing prototypes with hempcrete. I think this is one new material that's globally trending in the construction industry as a regenerative construction material. So this is a traditional Bhutanese home in the western region, and here we're piloting hempcrete. So the mixture you see in the bucket is a hempcrete mixture. So they're making blocks and also putting it in between the panels. So this is supposed to be a very, it has insulation properties and energy efficient material. So we're excited to try this. However, to scale it up, we still need the proper documentation, the legalization of growing industrial hemps in the country. So right now it's at a trial prototype session. But we're very grateful to Karuna Foundation for giving us the grant with which we can meet a quarter of the demand we have. And there's still a lot more to do, but housing has always been at the core of what we do at Tarayana. But in the last 4 years, we've not been able to do any housing improvement, as for the reason Lindsay cited. It's very difficult to get resources for housing improvement, and that's mainly because the donors and development partners do not see the impacts beyond the structure, when it actually helps build the self-confidence, the self-esteem of the family living in there, the children living in that house. It helps in maintaining the personal hygiene and sanitation. It helps them dream bigger, have aspirations. And these are communities who did not dare to dream of having a proper house of their own. And so with supporters like Karuna Foundation, we're helping enabling these families living in poverty to dream and to aspire. And once they have a comfortable life, then they're able to think of nature, they're able to think of the community, then, even as contributing to the global conservation efforts. So this particular community, they were living in poverty in those small houses, small bamboo sheds, now have proper house. And now, just recently, they've offered to dedicate an ecological park in their community. So this is a transformation that is taking place from a family at a household level to the community, to the nation, and then conservation at the global level.
Wonderful. Thank you. So as we wrap up, I would like to invite anyone who's interested to join our efforts. As Sonam mentioned, the grant from Karuna Foundation meets less than a quarter of the current demand for new housing in very, very vulnerable communities. And so we are hoping that over the coming years, we are able to meet more of that demand. And so feel free to pull any of us aside to chat further about this. And of course, there's so many more things that we can chat about as well. And I think the hopes here is that if we can come up with a good model for climate resilient housing in the rural areas, that can actually be scaled outside of Bhutan as well. And we have a team looking at the ways that can be done using locally available materials throughout much of the Eastern Himalaya and beyond. So again, please pull us aside and come chat with us about that. And please be sure to join us for the conversation that Tsiring Yongsom is going to be hosting tomorrow about Galafu Mindfulness City. That will be another look at gross national happiness and the ways in which it's being operationalized in Bhutan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.